I'm the editor of the Girlfriend newsletter. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. So welcome everyone tonight to our monthly discussion with the author of our book of the month. And this month, I'm so grateful that you all chose the Book of Cold Cases as our September book club pick. And so tonight, I'm so pleased to be joined by the author of the book, Simone St. James, a best-selling author of The Sundown Motel and many other books. So welcome, Simone.
Hi, everyone.
So nice to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. What a wonderful, fun invite. Just out of the blue, I was very happy to get it.
Oh, thank you. So for the handful of people who haven't read the book, and there's probably 3 or 4 out there, and that's about it, but can you give me the elevator pitch, sort of the 30-second or 1-minute synopsis of what the book is about for those that might not have picked it up yet?
Sure. The Book of Cold Cases is a supernatural thriller, ghost story thriller. And it's about a very infamous serial murder case from the 1970s, which is a case that I made up. It's not a real case. And there was a series of murders. And at the time, a young woman was arrested for the crimes, and she went to trial and she was acquitted. And no one ever really knew whether she did it or not. And in the present day, a young woman is a true crime blogger, and she gets the chance to meet this woman, and they talk. And this woman, Beth, says to her, well, I'm going to tell you everything that happened, the real truth of what happened in the 70s. So the book is a bit of a back and forth, past and present, and their interview, and who's lying, and why did she decide to tell her story now, and who's manipulating who, and what is the real truth, and is she a murderer? And then there's ghosts in the mix, and so it's a whole bunch of wild stuff. It's just it's a fun thriller story with a ghost story in the background.
Now, I know you like to write thrillers and that you're very good at that. What was the impetus behind this particular book idea? Did you read about a case or hear about a woman serial killer? Or what prompted you to get into this book?
Well, I wanted, it was interesting. I'm a very big true crime buff, and I was reading a lot of true crime and dealing with a lot of true crime and listening to a lot of podcasts. And, you always get these big stories about these big serial killers. And I thought, what if you had one of those really big, terrifying serial killers, but everyone thought maybe it was a woman. What if you had like the Zodiac case, for example, was never solved, and it was a man who went around San Francisco in the late 1960s and early 1970s and murdered random people, shot them and stabbed them, and they never caught him. They still have never caught him. I thought, well, what if you had like a Zodiac type case, but the suspect was a woman? That isn't like a simple flip. Like that changes every single part of that story. It changes who your suspect is and what her background is, and what maybe did she or didn't she do it, and how everyone sees her, and how the media sees it, and how it's written about, and how the police prosecute it. And it just changes every single thing about that story. And I found that a really fascinating idea. So I started with that, just the idea of a potentially a female serial killer, and how would you talk to this woman? Because, we find, male serial killers, if you were going to do an interview, like with the Hannibal Lecter type situation, the man is terrifying. Even if he's behind bars, he's terrifying. Well, if you were to interview a female serial killer, or someone who was potentially a serial killer, would you find her frightening? How we don't really see women as frightening. And in this case, she's a woman in the present day situation. She's a woman who's over 60. We don't see women, and we don't see women who are over 60 as scary. They're not terrifying.
And she's also very attractive, correct? And
yes,
wealthy.
and she is gorgeous and wealthy, but she's also very smart, very manipulative, very cold. And you don't really know when she's telling you the truth, and you don't really know if she's trying to she's got her own purposes behind what she's telling you. So I had a lot of fun with that cat and mouse game between those two.
So I know it jumps back and forth between 2 timelines, the one with Shay in 2017, and then the one when the murders take place in 1977. Was that difficult to do? Do you like to go back and forth like that between 2 timelines, or is that tricky? Do you write do you write one part first and then put the other 2?
No, I write in sequence. So chapter 1 and then chapter, even if it's going back and forth, that's what I'm doing as the writer, is I'm going back and forth. It's really, really challenging to write more than one timeline. It's really, really, really challenging to do. But in certain stories, like, it just kind of calls for it. You know, you can't
Right.
really have a book about someone who's potentially a serial killer and then just have your whole book have two people sitting and talking about it. I mean, you know, your readers like, take me there, like, take me into the 1970s, show me what happened. So, you know, you just kind of have to jump into that scene in the past and just jump in and just show everybody, like, here's how exciting it was. So I mean, that's just kind of what the story calls for. If the story doesn't really call for it, you don't need to do it. But I just really felt with this story, I mean, if you're gonna, I did have a really compelling present day storyline because, you know, she was acquitted of murder, officially acquitted, and she can never be tried again. And so maybe
Right.
she is an innocent woman, and maybe she is a murderer who got away with it. So that's a really intriguing present
Yeah.
day storyline. But then if you're going to talk about historic, like, murders that happened in the past, you just want to, just story wise, you just want to take readers right back there. So it was just something I had to do for story purposes.
Right. So, was there a particular character or scene that was difficult or more challenging to write than the others? Uh, Perhaps the detective, or I mean, was there something that was particularly challenging for you in this book to write about?
There wasn't a particular one, but the structure itself was very challenging, because and we won't do any spoilers in case people haven't read it, but there's like, where different twists are revealed throughout the book is
Yeah.
kind of like, yeah, I had to plan that and build up to it. And then, you know, and it isn't just like, oh, there's a big mystery, and then on the second last page you just get the answer to everything on, like,
Right.
the second last page. Like, everything is sort of dripped out throughout the book, and there's a big reveal that's sort of halfway through, and then there's another twist that's toward the end. So I had to really plan all that out, and that was overall just very challenging. I did like several drafts of the book. Like, it was didn't just come out like in this perfect structure. I had a few little wrong turns, and I got to delete this part, and this isn't working, and I got to go back. And
Yeah.
so I mean, that definitely was the most challenging part for sure.
Well, I was going to ask you how long it took you to write this book. I think you write full time now, so I was
I
wondering.
do.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, my books take in total about 18 months, and but that's from like blank page all the way through. Like, I write a draft, I turn it in. Well, I revise it myself first before I turn it into my publisher, and then my editor reads it and she gives suggestions, and we go through it again. And then frankly, we go through it again. And
Right.
then sometimes we go through it again. And then the copy editor goes through and does the nitpicking punctuation and grammar stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, it isn't just like I spend 18 months just writing it. It's like 18 months is the whole process
Right.
for about each of my books. Yeah.
So this is the question I know you've been asked a million times, but I have to ask it anyway. I mean, what was your life like? I think you were in television for 20 years, and I
Mhm.
know I've heard you say that it was not glamorous in any way, shape, or form.
No.
It was actually pretty dull. But you did that for 20 years, and you were writing on the side or at night on
Mhm.
holidays.
Yep.
Were you always a writer since you were young, a kid, and then but you got a full time job in television? You wrote on the side. I mean, how did it all kind of come to be?
Yeah, I mean, I'd always written for my own enjoyment. My first thing I ever wrote was in grade 4, and I rewrote The Hobbit with a female protagonist because I loved The Hobbit, but it was all boys. I'm not sure there's one female in The Hobbit, the original book. So it was like, there's no girls in this, and I was in grade 4, and so I just rewrote my own thing with a girl in it. So I mean, I've always just written for my own, just for my own storytelling in my own head. Like, I just enjoy it, and I've always loved doing that. And I did that through my 20s, and then it never occurred to me to take a shot at being a published writer until I was somewhere in my 30s.
Huh.
And it was like, really, people do that? Like, you could just try and you might get accepted. Like, people just do, like, it just never been something that occurred to me. It's just like saying, hey, yeah, go fly a rocket ship. I'm like, people do that. So I at that time I was very much into reading romance and writing romance novels. So I wrote a couple of romance novels and I sent them off to agents, and they got rejected, and I spent years getting rejected. And so I did do it, like, yeah, in my spare time for years. And for a lot of years I did it without any encouragement from
Yeah.
anybody. All I got was rejections. I certainly wasn't making any money. I had my day job. So And then I wrote a book that I was kind of at the verge of giving up the publishing thing. I was writing for my own enjoyment, and I wrote a book. And I came up with the idea of a woman who works for a temp agency, and she gets assigned to assist a ghost hunter. And I just wanted to know how that story would pan out, like just for myself. And so I wrote that. I thought, well, there's no one's going to want to read this. Like, there's nobody's going to want to read this. And so but I've tried anyway, and I sent it out to agents, and I got a whole bunch of rejections again. But I had one agent call me and say, I love this, and I think I can sell it. And
it's just
and then
the haunting of Maddie Claire.
The Haunting of Maddie Claire, yeah. And then she sent it to a few editors, and a couple of them passed on it. And I had one editor who said, I love this and I want to publish it. So it just takes that one yes, And so that started the whole thing. And then at that time I still had my day job, which as you said, people say, I worked in television, and I get it so often. It's like, oh, were you like on air? Were you a producer or something? And I was like, oh my God, no, I was not. I did budgets. I did Excel spreadsheets, because every TV show has a budget, and you have to track how much you have and how much you spent and what you spent it on. It's just very, 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 very simple. And I had to track all that. So that was what I did. I did spreadsheets during the day. And then in the evenings, I came home and I wrote. And I did that through my first when I was writing my third published book. I was finally like, okay, I think I've had enough publishing contracts back to back that I think I can make a go of this. Because you get that first publishing contract, and it might just be a one-off, and then might just be like, well, that didn't sell, so bye, never call us again, right? So don't quit your day job, as they say. Do not quit your day job. So I did not quit my day job at first, those first few years. And I finally did. While I was writing my third book, I finally was like, I think I'm going to make the best go of this I can. And my husband was supportive of it. Yeah. So I took that leap, and it has worked out. I mean, it was tight those first few years. I mean, I certainly was anywhere near a bestseller list. It was like, I was making less than my day job salary, that's for sure, for a while. Right. So, I mean, it was a bit of a sacrifice, but it ended up working out.
So everything since that first book, have you started anything else that you didn't finish and went on to the next book, or has it been pretty much you wrote it, got it published, and then went on to the next book?
I've had one or two, because with the publisher, you kind of, when you turn in your last book and they would say, okay, we want another book from you. And so you pitch them your idea, and it's in the very, very early stages. And so they can kind of say, like, this idea interests us. We think they're thinking from a sales perspective, like, right, will anybody buy this idea? Or, and they're thinking about like your career. Like, if I suddenly decided I was going to write a sci-fi book, my publisher would say, well, I don't advise that, because, you're, like they want to sell books, is kind of, and that's great. When they sell books, everybody makes money. So, you have to kind of pitch them an idea. It's very early. Oh, my lamp just went out. Sorry about that. It's very early in the process. And, I've had a couple times where my publisher was like, we're not super keen on that idea.
Right.
So, but it wasn't like I wrote a whole book and they were like, scrap it. Like, that's never happened. No.
So in this book, and once again, we're talking about the Book of Cold Cases with the author Simone St. James. I know I was looking it up today. There's a Clear Lake, Oregon, but not a Claire Lake, Oregon, I don't believe. I mean, did you have a setting in mind because the atmosphere is so vivid, as everybody says, all the reviewers, right. Did you have this kind of town in mind, and the Greer Mansion? Did you have something in your brain that you'd seen a similar place that you based this on, or no?
No, I made them up, and I love to, when I write my books, I love to just make up the town, because then I don't have to deal with any maps. I don't have to deal with it. And I don't have to deal with anyone who lives in that town emailing me after the book comes out going, that's not where the drugstore is. Yeah, there's a left turn on that corner or whatever, right? It's like, oh God. So I just make up my towns, and then I just get to do whatever I want, and I make them as big or as small as I want, and wherever I need them to be. So that's, for me, that's part of the fun part. And I didn't base it on any real town. I didn't base the house on any real house. The Greer Mansion is, I was kind of, because I've written a number of ghost stories at this point, and I was kind of playing off the idea of a haunted house. And it's always like, the traditional haunted house is always like a Gothic monstrosity with all these spires and everything. And I made my haunted house a mid-century modern house with like from the 70s with like all those brown and gold colors and like all the, the whatever avocado colored kitchen and all that stuff. So I had a lot of fun with that, which is where my haunted house was like actually a 1950s 60s haunted house. So yeah, it's good.
So I think you're out in the Toronto area. I mean, did you actually have you traveled to Oregon? Is that a place you like to go?
I have been there only once, I think. But I just get to do a lot of, especially with the pandemic too. I mean, a lot of virtual traveling and
Yeah.
a lot of Google Street View and
So what's your writing process like now that you're a full-time writer? Do you get up and make sure that you write a certain number of hours every day, or how do you structure your time?
Well, I'm not always in drafting mode. Like I say, like I'll be, sometimes I'm drafting, but other times I'm going back through it and re-editing. And sometimes as I'm writing, like I kind of hit a point and I'm like, no, I need to go back and do some editing before I can go forward. Right. So every day isn't like a sitting down and typing day. I have plenty of those for sure, but like I do have periods of time where I also have periods of time before I start writing the book where I'm still really putting together the idea. The idea for a novel has to be really strong and really layered, and it has to be like good enough for like a good 300 to 400 pages. Mm-hmm. It can't just be like, oh, I don't know, like there was a ghost, like, and I get that from people all the time. Well, you should write about this ghost story. And it's like, well, you just told me that ghost story in 2 sentences. Like I need 350 pages. So I spend a lot of time at the beginning, like, before I even write anything, or maybe I've written a few sketches or I've written a page or two, but I spent a lot of time in the beginning really weaving my idea together. Who are these characters? What is this setting? What is this suspense? Why does the reader care about any of these people? Like, what's interesting about this to me, and what I think would be interesting to the reader? So there's a spin up period at the beginning, and then there's definitely a huge drafting period, and then but sometimes I'm in an editing period and then revising, and I'm going through it, and maybe I'm switching scenes around or I'm taking things in and out. And then there's a period where it goes to my editor, and she and I are working through it. So, I mean, yeah, I do work. I'm a daytime person. I'm not a night person. I'm not creative at night. So I do kind of work semi-regular office hours, but it's not always drafting.
Yeah. Well, I know with Shay, the main character, I mean, I was really riveted by her because of how you portrayed her as kind of awkward. She had gone through this divorce, she had the cat then eventually. And, you're pulling for her the whole way,
Right. Yeah. And I wanted to write a character kind of starts at the beginning of the book. She's starting in a kind of a low point.
Yeah.
And that was kind of deliberate. I wanted her to be starting at a low point, and then she kind of over the course, even though there's these catastrophic, terrifying things happening through the course of the book, but overall her trajectory is she's coming into her own. Exactly. And you kind of, with different main characters, you might have one like where like the traditional way is like you have this character and you make really bad things happen to them and they go down and then they go back up. And this one, I just wanted her to be starting at a low point, and then even though all these negative things are happening and these terrifying things, she's really going on she goes on an upswing for most of the book. And I just found that counteracts some of the darkness that's in the story when you have a character that you're rooting for who's really digging in and figuring out what she's capable of. I just enjoy reading that. So sometimes that's how I do too. Yeah.
She kept me hanging in there. I was really pulling for her the whole way. So what authors do you love, and have you read a great book that you could recommend to the audience? Is there something that you've read this year that blew you away?
Well, if you love the scary ghost stories stuff, there's a debut author who put a book out back in May. Her name is Isabel Cañas, and she wrote a book called The Hacienda. And it's set in Mexico in the 19th century Mexico. And this young woman, it's like, if you've ever read a classic Gothic, it's like just the most amazing riff on it. Like this young woman, she's in dire straits financially. She marries a rich man. He brings her to his house that's in the middle of nowhere. She comes to this house. There's the weird his weird sister lives there. There's the weird housekeeper. There's weird things happening in this house. No one believes her. He's very sinister. What's the history of this house? What's been going on? And it just, if you enjoy the supernatural ghosty stuff, like it's very, very ghosty. It just ratchets and ratchets and ratchets up. And it's her debut novel. And I could not put it down. You'll read it in an afternoon. Like it just does not let up. It's fantastic.
Wow. Okay. I'll have to check that out. So I'm just curious, after reading this book, is there anything that terrifies you personally? What's scared you in your life?
Everything. I'm scared of everything. I write about things that scare me because it's kind of cathartic, and I figure that maybe some of those things will scare other people. But I don't like being alone in the dark. I don't like basements. I don't like dark. I don't like dark woods. I don't like going outside in the dark. I don't like wandering the woods. I don't like remote cabins. I don't like camping. I don't like
the list goes on and on.
So I have no shortage of things to write about that I find terrifying. So God, I should write a camping book. I don't even know if I'd be able to write that. I would be too scared to write. I'm terrified of camping. So I have no shortage of things that scare me.
So I asked the readers or some of our members what they wanted to know from you. And I mean, everybody wants to know, what are you working on next? What's happening next?
Well, I have, first of all, I have on October 4th, which is just a couple of weeks away, I wrote a novella, which is shorter than about a third of the length of one of my usual novels. And it's coming out in audio on October 4th and in ebook in January. It's called Ghost 19. And it's set in the 1950s. And it's about a woman who was a New York theater actress. And she's had a nervous breakdown. And she leaves New York and she goes to stay in this little rented house, and she becomes agoraphobic. She can't leave, and she's watching her neighbors, and she thinks that one of them might have been murdered. So that's a very ghosty, shorter story.
That's my kind of book.
Yeah, and it's coming out in audio, like I say, on October 4, and then ebook in January 4, I think. And so that's coming out. And then beyond that, I've also written like another full-length novel. I don't have a release date for that, but that will be coming in the next year or something. I don't know. My publisher decides that. And that one is about a married couple, and they're just married and they're on their honeymoon, and they are driving. They take a wrong turn. They drive down the wrong road. They pick up the wrong hitchhiker, and everything goes haywire on their honeymoon. And it's also a ghost story. So that's with my publisher now. And so I have another full-length novel coming out next too.
So when you come up with these ideas, like the one you just talked about, do you wake up in the middle of the night or something and think, oh, that would be a great book, and you scribble something down? Or I have done that. I have done it. I've also done it while I was driving, where I'm just driving alone in my car, or and you just kind of like your brain's just kind of going, and then suddenly I'm just alone in my car talking to myself going, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. I got to pull over and use my notes app on my phone. So yeah, that has happened. Oh, that's definitely happened for sure. Yeah. Waking up with stories, getting them as you're drifting off, driving, showering, doing the dishes. I mean, that definitely happens. So folks also wanted to know if you could see a certain actress playing Beth and playing Shay in a movie or TV series version of this book. Have you thought about that?
Not specifically. I don't specifically. I mean, I use photos sometimes, like as I kind of use them as inspiration, but I don't fixate on specific actors or actresses when I'm writing. Although I did post this on Instagram that the character of Michael, who's kind of the love interest in this book, was inspired by a photo I saw of Henry Cavill wearing a turtleneck.
He was great. Michael was great.
And I was like, well, I'm just putting Henry Cavill in a turtleneck in this book. I'm just adding him in. So there you go. Maybe if it gets made, it'll cross his desk if it gets made.
So do your family, your husband, does he read these books before they come out, or are they sort of a surprise when they come out, or siblings or some people reading this as you're going along? I'm just curious.
My family doesn't. My husband actually, he doesn't. It's kind of weird with family because he doesn't really want he doesn't really want to read the books, and it's kind of weird because I think I'm not sure. I feel this is very common with authors. Like a lot of us have spouses or husbands who do read the books, but a lot of us don't. And it's kind of like it's almost like they don't really they want to leave that as your thing that you do. I think maybe. But what he does love to do is when I'm in the beginning stages and I'm brainstorming ideas and I'm just tossing ideas around, he loves to do that. And I'll just be like, what if it was like a haunted, boat? And he's like, yeah. And then there's a storm. And then there's this, and he loves to do that brainstorming stuff. He loves to do that. Yeah. So he helps me with that a lot. My family does read the books when they come out. They're very, very good about it. And they go and they buy it and they read it and then they text me, I read the book. So yeah, that's always really good.
As far impressed by your success.
Yeah. And as far as while I'm reading, I have a couple of close writer friends who I will get more into the weeds with them, or I will just brainstorm with them, like, because they have written novels. So I'll be like, I have a plot problem. What do you think? And then they'll kind of help me with like stuff that someone who's not a writer is going to have some ideas, but someone who is a writer really understands like how to get through some of these thorny problems. And they usually read at least one draft of the book and then just give me overall ideas, like if there's something that just doesn't work, or character that doesn't work, or plot point that jumps out of them that doesn't make any sense, or a part where they were just lost. They'll be like, I don't know what was going on in here. And like, oh yeah, I got to go back. So, I mean, it's always helpful to have that second pair of eyes, even just for someone to say like, I really couldn't follow the plot in this particular point because maybe you edited it too much and like it's kind of choppy and like it makes sense in your head, but if someone coming in and reading it is like, what? I don't follow. So, I mean, those kinds of things I do get my writer friends to kind of read, but I don't have a big like open door thing while I'm writing. It's mostly just me just sweating it out, trying to figure out all my problems as I'm doing it.
So 2 more questions. One is that you seem like the kind of person that would be able to talk about books, recommend a TV series, a podcast, something for people that are like you that love these, thrillers and these mysteries.
Like a TV show and a podcast?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of the podcast world. I'm a big fan of My Favorite Murder, which is a true crime podcast. It's a true crime comedy podcast. So it's very chatty and lighthearted. So, it's not for everybody. It's not, it's not the tone isn't going to be for everybody, but I do love it. And as far as TV shows, I really don't watch a lot of thriller TV. I will say for the ghost stuff, I mean, I watched on Netflix, The Haunting of Hill House. They did a couple years ago. It was an 8 or 9 episode series.
I watched that too. It was excellent.
It was fantastic. I loved it. I've actually watched that series a couple of times because it's so good. So it's more of a ghosty thing. I wouldn't say it's a straight up thriller, but it's definitely one of my favorites. I've watched it more than once. Yeah.
And finally, what I ask everybody, The Girlfriend's all about female friendship and how important friendships are, especially as we grow older. So I just wondered, when you're not reading or writing your books, what do you like to do for fun with your friends?
Okay, so I talked about my writer friends, and they are women, and we go on writer retreats, which really are work trips. They are. But we work like all day until about 6 or 7 o'clock, and then after that is a really good time, and we talk about whatever we want, and we watch whatever TV we want, and we cook whatever we want, or we go out to eat, and we have a few drinks, and we just let loose, and we have a really good time. So I do actually do like they are work. We do get a lot of work done, but they're still girls' weekends basically. And then we've never gone to one where they had to fly to. We always go to one where we just drive somewhere. We've done it in the middle of winter when the snow was like knee high, and it was like, oh well, I guess we'll just buy a bunch of booze and food and just sit in our little Airbnb for 3 or 4 days and just not leave. We're happy with that. So yeah, the big thing that I do with my friends is definitely those girls' weekends.
That's great.
They're like amazing, and it was one of the things about the pandemic and the lockdown was we didn't do it for like a couple of years, and we were just like, we really felt it. We of
Yeah.
course we were on Zoom all the time as everybody was, but like it was like,
Not
man,
quite the
we
same.
need to get together and do the thing that we love to do. And we all really felt it when we couldn't do that for a couple of years.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Simone. Again, our girlfriend book club pick for September is the Book of Cold Cases. If you haven't gotten it, please buy it. It's a wonderful read. You probably won't be able to put it down once you start it. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And for those of you in the book club, please stay on the book club page, because as always, I'll be posting about 6 conversation starters so that you guys can talk about the book amongst yourselves. So have a great evening, Simone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And I say hi to everybody, because I am Gen X myself. So great to see you all.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.